So Daniel, we're doing a series of videos talking about new capabilities and new business benefits of the latest release of the ForgeRock Identity Platform. Can you tell us a little bit about the overall platform story?
I can, and before we do, I mean, that's right on. We have a new platform launch coming out, lots of new great features, and this is going to kind of talk a little bit about kind of our orientation of what we're thinking about when we think about identity and what we're kind of building towards. And then from this, we're kind of deriving all the other videos, which so far are covering. Where are the different topics we're covering?
About autonomous servers, we're talking about new capabilities around logging in and registration through social providers and all kinds of other things.
Cool. Well, so as we go into our story on identity, it's really important to understand how we think about identity and access management, or what we endearingly have been calling kind of our identity relationship management.
That's right.
And so if you think about the old world of identity, which is still, relevant today, it all centered around this person right here. It's all about the user, right? How do I build identity platforms to talk about things like identity management? Things like self-service, password reset, all that kind of great
Single
stuff.
sign-on?
Single sign-on, yeah.
Yep.
So SSO, you had like access management, profile management.
But all really focused on the person, the human being.
All focused on the person.
Yeah.
And then things like privacy, right? Privacy and consent. And of course, directory services, so directories. So all great stuff, still something today that is constantly asked for. Like if you go into a Fortune 1000 business, they're gonna have a digital strategy. They're thinking about how do I do digital engagement with customers potentially? How do I actually use identity to create a greater digital experience for the user to, engage with them in lots of different ways that make their life very exciting. So that's all good and great. But when we think about identity, it's a lot more than that. We think about it in terms of things like mobile devices. So how do you actually bring identity to the mobile device? We think about it in terms of things. So IoT, light bulbs, door locks, cars, set-top boxes, smart footballs, all that kind of smart vacuums, all the type of things here. All of this is an identity as well. And then you go off into the cloud and you have all these applications and services that you're engaging with, right? You have APIs, you have legacy apps, you have modern apps, you have new microservices that people are engaging with. And from our perspective, we think about all of this as the relationship, right? How do you actually use identity management to kind of create different transformative relationships across these things? And this becomes the digital strategy. When we talk about customer identity, we're talking about all of this. Most identity vendors are just talking about this. So, when we get into the mobile device, we think about things like device registration, device pairing, trusted devices. We think about protecting apps running on those devices. So like the access management around applications running on your devices. We think about one-time password.
Yep.
Push authentication, passwordless. And the whole mobile movement is a really powerful thing. Again, driving towards that omni-channel experience of how the user engages with all these different digital assets, and in this case, through the mobile phone.
But then it keeps going.
It keeps going,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
It keeps going on and on. And then you go to IoT, and you think about the same thing. Like there's a whole piece of around registration and synchronization when new devices come online. And that doesn't have to be a smart mobile device. It could be a constrained device, speaking a protocol we've never heard of. So you get into kind of the registration and sync. You get into the policy management around the device. So how do I actually enforce policies around these things? There's all kinds of attributes around that you may want to share. There's sharing of data for devices. So how do I actually do data sharing? How do I do data authorization? How do I actually authorize data to be leveraged, and how do I revoke access to that data?
How do I share these things with other people in my actual physical world too, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So getting into the sharing my things about me with others, right? And that can happen with mobile device, it can happen with IoT, it can happen with user identity as well. You also could get into things like physical logical access. I mean, this could be about a car authenticating to a cloud service. It could be about me just getting access to a building. There's all kinds of non-traditional things that we need to be able to think about. Smart door locks are a great example, and the hotel experience, right? And then finally, when you get to the cloud, when we talk about microservices, we're really talking about the things running in the cloud. The user, the mobile devices, the IoT devices, they're all engaging with things that live in the cloud, right? And that could be apps, it could be APIs, it could be microservices like we have drawn here. It may be modern apps, it could be like legacy infrastructure. An identity context has to travel across all these different things. So in the end, when you're thinking about your identity strategy, you want to think about a couple of things. One, how do I drive relationships across users, mobile devices, IoT, and microservices?
Yep.
How do I create transformative experiences by sharing that data, creating mashups of data to kind of differentiate myself from others? And that's really what the ForgeRock platform is really about, is looking at this holistic landscape, identifying the areas where a customer may potentially have pain that they want to solve immediately, help them modernize their infrastructure, and then know that they're future-proofed for solving other issues and problems that will arise over the next 12 to 24 months moving forward. So it's a very different kind of approach to identity. It's the platform story. How do you actually create a unified platform that can create these transformative experiences and treat identity as core IP that differentiates?
It's a much more conversation that encompasses all areas of someone's business.
Yeah, and if you think about that, most identity vendors, they won't try and think about the broader strategy. They'll focus in on something like access management or federation, for example, that they can just solve that one pain point, which might be a pain point tied to our RFP happening right now, right? And that's great, but then what do? You go through a whole procurement process, you deploy a whole new thing that you integrate in there. How do you actually think about this more strategically so that your access management then moves to adaptive risk and context, or identity management, or data synchronization,
or IoT,
or mobile? And that's kind of the fallacy of these like very targeted niche plays, is they don't think about that. And so our whole model is to think about the holistic picture emanating from the relationship and giving you lots of different touch points to start and attack the problem.
And this is the kind of thing you can do with the new release of the ForgeRock Identity Platform.
This is exactly the big focus of the new release, where you're going to be seeing things that are about, one, making deployment easier, whole DevOps friendly piece. Two, about reducing friction. So you talked about things like the social providers and kind of the privacy and profile management stuff, where it may be that I just want to accelerate getting a new prospect access to a retail service as fast as possible. I don't want to make them go through a heavy process like registration. And so there's a lot of stuff in there about reducing friction. There's a lot of stuff around protecting more of the services out in the cloud. A big focus on solidifying some of the new capabilities around IoT. We'll talk about things like proof of possession and how we can kind of secure things in a better way. So a lot of really good progress. And then even new things with our database or with our directory around proxies and distributed architectures and multi-tenancy and things like that. All things that help drive this. So you'll learn a lot from the videos that are coming up. A lot of rich data in there. I recommend you watch them maybe 3-4 times.
For sure. I'll put them on repeat.
Put them on repeat. And so hope you enjoy learning.
Right on. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah. Thank you.